course, I got set up down here with everything but the clicker. Well, welcome back for those who have been here every night. If you've missed one or two lessons, we are studying the miracles of Jesus just like the kids are back in their classrooms. And so we're going to continue that tonight. The first night, on Sunday night, we looked at Jesus' power over needs, the fact that he provides for us in every need that we encounter in this life, that Jesus satisfies those needs. And then last night, Scott talked about the power that Jesus has over nature, that he is in complete control. And so we talked about how Jesus controls, and we can trust him, and we need to build our faith on that trust. And so tonight we're going to continue talking about the miracles of Jesus, and we're going to talk about Jesus' power over problems. The idea of Jesus having power over problems really comes down to this idea of understanding that Jesus helps us with the things that we go through in life. Now, I'm going to be very careful because tomorrow night Brian's going to talk about power over sickness, and there's going to be a lot of overlap. There's going to be a lot of talking about various diseases or illnesses or physical ailments that people will struggle with that we'll talk about tonight. But it's important to realize as we make application and we look at some of the stories we do tonight, problems don't just mean physical problems. What are some other types of problems we might encounter or might experience as we go through this journey called life? Jason? Okay, so spiritual problems. We might have a crisis of faith or struggling to understand God or put our faith into action. There might be problems in our workplace employment, and that might feed into financial problems. How do I get by in life, pay for the things that I need to pay for, and so on and so forth. Any other thoughts? The problems? Brian? We're going to have interpersonal problems. Believe it or not, nobody's going to think quite like you do. And that necessarily means you're not always going to agree with people, even if they're your best friend. Husbands and wives, maybe you can attest to this. We have to have this understanding that there will be, just by the nature of us being unique people, interpersonal problems or challenges that we encounter. Anyone else with the types of problems? Jonathan? Yeah, disappointment. Our best laid plans, we do as much as we can, and again, as we talked about last night, we're not the ones in control. And despite our best efforts, perhaps the things that we would like to happen don't materialize. And so we'll struggle with that. We can have emotional and mental problems, a struggle of the conversations we have with ourselves in our own heads. And there's certainly others. We can talk about grief. We can talk about oppression and being oppressed by outside forces. We can talk about mistakes that we make. And certainly we can talk about the problem of sin, whether it's our own sin or somebody else's sin causing problems in our lives. And as we're talking about Jesus tonight, it's important to realize that Jesus knows all of that vast spectrum of problems, and he wants to help, and he's able to help. So he knows, he wants to help, and he's able to help. Open your Bibles, if you would, with me to Luke chapter 7. Luke chapter 7, as we begin looking at Jesus' power over problems, we start with kind of the broad scope that we have been each night, just looking at miracles in general. And as we're talking about Jesus' miracles tonight, we get a clear picture that Jesus' miracles show his power. And not just the scale of being able to affect change or make things happen, even if they are supernatural in scope, like walking on water or calming a storm with a word, but also the understanding that he has power in the sense of the ability to exercise that power. Typically, we'll call that authority. Jesus has the authority over our problems and over our lives if we are willing to submit to his lordship. He's ultimately always in this position of authority, but he allows us to choose whether we will submit ourselves to him. When we come to Luke chapter 7, though, there's this question of, does Jesus in this position of power? We've been hearing these reports now, and for this group, it's John the Baptist and his disciples, and he's coming towards the end of his run and his life. And so he sends some disciples to confirm some things that he's already professed in John chapter 1. This is the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. But now there's this reconnaissance mission, so to speak. His disciples go to ask him this very important question. Can I get somebody to read for us nice and loud tonight? Luke 7:18 through 23. Luke chapter 7, verses 18 through 23. Go ahead, Jason. So, what's the question that John gives his disciples to ask Jesus? What do they want to know? Are you it or him? Yeah. And so what are they really asking in that question? Because that's a very broad, abstract, not specific question. Like, are you the one who is to come? Or should we look for somebody else? What are they talking about? Who are they looking for? The Messiah. This is the idea of the promised one, God's chosen king, this descendant of David that the prophets have been pointing to for all of these hundreds of years that we see in the biblical record. And so John sends his disciples to ask, are you the one? And does Jesus say yes or no? He doesn't say either of those directly, does he? How does he answer them? There's a little answer for you, Wayne. Yeah. He says, go back and tell John what you've seen. There's some evidence here you need to report. The blind can see, the lame can walk, the deaf can hear, those with leprosy are cleansed, the dead are raised. And it all culminates in the last one. The poor have the good news preached to them. How is this an answer to their question? Are you the Messiah? Because it seems, as far as the biblical account, that that's a satisfactory response. Jason?
Well, I figure by Jesus curing all those diseases and illnesses and all that stuff, by him doing that, he proves that he's the Messiah right then and there.
Sure.
So he tells them, when he tells them, go back and report to John what you've seen and heard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
John, there's your answer.
Yeah, there's power and authority on display here with all of these problems that people keep bringing to Jesus, and he's able to solve them all. And so this is a demonstration of power and authority in that regard. Anybody else have thoughts on why this would be a satisfactory answer? Who else, right? This puts Jesus on an unparalleled, unmatched level when it comes to potential contenders for the Messiah or who might be the Messiah. Jonathan and then Scott.
Jesus is also paraphrasing a passage from the book of Isaiah.
Yeah.
John the Baptist is familiar with the Old Testament. This passage, I say the Old Testament, the same passage Jesus read back in chapter 4 when he was in front of the people, and read out Isaiah, rolled up the scroll that said, today the scripture has been fulfilled. So repeating that same scripture to John the Baptist.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is messianic prophecy that's talking about the coming king, and Jesus saying, I'm fulfilling it. So this is proof positive that I am him. There's lots of different places in Isaiah that'll actually touch on what these examples. One is Isaiah 35, 5 and 6, where the Bible will say, then the eyes of the blind will be opened and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then the lame will leap like a deer and the tongue of the mute will sing for joy. For water will gush in the wilderness and streams in the desert. And in context, Isaiah is talking about this coming, this return of the ransomed, those who are the remainder of God's chosen people. And ultimately, it's talking about Jesus' work and the establishment of the church, God's people now being reconciled to him. Were you going to say to that effect, Scott? Okay. Randy, did you have a thought? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is powerful, not just in the fact that this is amazing stuff to be seeing, but God said this would happen hundreds of years ago. And so the fact that it's being fulfilled and that it was said that this would be fulfilled, to have any one of these things happen would be remarkable. But have them all happening in concert together with Jesus' ministry points directly at not only his power, not only his authority, but his role, again, as God's chosen king. And not just, again, any king. He is the Son of God in the flesh. And so it's a huge arrow, if you will. We talked about miracles being signs and wonders. This kind of marries those ideas and points to Jesus as the one who's been promised by God. Of important note, in John chapter 10, 36 through 38, Jesus will say, look, you can take my word for it or not, and if you're struggling to believe the words I'm saying, that's fine, but pay attention to what I'm doing. And when you see the works, believe on account of the works. He says, if you're having a difficult time hearing the words that I'm saying, look at the things that I'm doing, and that's going to confirm to you the words that I'm saying are truly divine. So if you're struggling with just the message, God's not sending it without any confirmation. There's these amazing signs that point to Jesus' authority as the Messiah, as the Christ. Any other thoughts here with miracles showing Jesus' power as he solves all these various problems? Matt. Big difference between pretending to be the Messiah, to gain a follower, to grab hold of power that's not really somebody's to take, and to actually step into that role because God has ordained it and given it to his Son, and to be doing these things not because he's trying to grab power. He has all the power, but he's exercising that power in great love and compassion for the people because, again, he knows our problems, he cares about our problems, and he's able to solve every single one of our problems. Turn over to the next chapter if you're still there in Luke, into Luke chapter 8. I want us to read this story together. There's really two accounts that are sort of interwoven here. And I'm just going to go ahead and put the rest of these up just so you can be thinking about it. As we look at these two problems, two different people are going to approach Jesus with problems. I want you to think, what do they have in common, and what sets them apart from one another? What things are the same between these two people, and what things set their situations very differently? Okay? I'm going to read for us here in Luke chapter 8, beginning in verse 40. When Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. Just then a man named Jairus came. He was a leader of the synagogue. He fell down at Jesus' feet and pleaded with him to come to his house because he had an only daughter, about 12 years old, and she was dying. While he was going, the crowds were nearly crushing him. A woman suffering from bleeding for 12 years, who had spent all she had on doctors and yet could not be healed by any, approached from behind and touched the end of his robe. Instantly, her bleeding stopped. "Who touched me?" Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the crowds are hemming you in and pressing against you." "Someone did touch me," said Jesus. "I know that power has gone out from me." When the woman saw that she was discovered, she came trembling and fell down before him. In the presence of all the people, she declared the reason she had touched him and how she was instantly healed. "Daughter," he said to her, "your faith has saved you. Go in peace." While he was still speaking, someone came from the synagogue leader's house and said, "Your daughter is dead. Don't trouble the teacher anymore." When Jesus heard it, he answered him, "Don't be afraid. Only believe, and she will be saved." After he came to the house, he let no one enter with him except Peter, John, James, and the child's father and mother. Everyone was crying and mourning for her. But he said, "Stop crying, because she is not dead, but asleep." They laughed at him because they knew she was dead. So he took her by the hand and called out, "Child, get up." Her spirit returned, and she got up at once. Then he gave orders that she be given something to eat. Her parents were astounded, but he instructed them to tell no one what had happened. So two people encounter Jesus in the same hour and have their problems solved. What things do you notice that are the same between these two people and their problems? Any similarities that you notice, Wayne?
They both had a great amount of faith.
Yeah. And they needed faith, right? This trust, this willingness, and a recognition even to put their faith in something to solve their problems. Here it's obviously Jesus. So they need faith, and it's based on faith of what they do in their moments of need. Other similarities. You think these two people are desperate? Go ahead, Forrest. Both kind of have moments of recognition in very different ways, which we can talk about, but there's this moment of having to decide what to do next with Jesus. Jesus recognizing that somebody's touched him and that power's gone out, and this woman having to decide, do I run? And the cover's been given. The disciples are saying, there's tons of people. Everybody's touching you, right? And so she has the choice, and she comes forward. And then, right in that next moment, after she's talked to Jesus and he's sent her on her way, Jairus has this news brought to him from his house. And so he has a choice. Do I just resign myself to this news that I've heard? Or do I listen to Jesus who says, don't be afraid? Right? So there's this moment of, what do I do now in this moment? Whether it's in a great moment, an exciting moment for the woman, or a debilitating and crushing moment for Jairus. What are we going to do with our faith in Jesus? How are we going to act on it? Are we going to give it up? These are choices that we make in those times. As I've already mentioned and was alluding to, and Forrest kind of touched on it, both of these people are in desperate situations. Why was the woman's situation desperate? She's bleeding, seriously ill, seriously at risk of dying. How long had she been struggling with this? 12 years. Are you going to add to that, Scott? So appreciate this. There's the physical problem. She's got financial problems also. She spent all of her wealth on doctors, and they've been able to do nothing for her. And so 12 years of this, of different approaches and techniques, and nothing has solved her problem. So there's a societal problem, a cultural problem that she, by religious standards, is unclean, and that hinders her from partaking in worship and being close to the people that she loves. There's a reason why she's on her own. So the fact that she's in a crowd, if people knew her situation, that would be a no-no. And so certainly this feeling of loneliness that she's probably struggled with. It's another problem. Jason?
I'm sure it had to be depressing to her, too.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. This is depression when we talk about how long does it take for you to give up hope in your situations? Does it take 12 years? Had she given up hope? Had she given up hope a long time ago? Is she still just kind of barely clinging on to like some shred? We know at least she had enough to actually get up and do something. In other accounts that the Gospels record, we actually get a little insight to this woman as she goes and does what she does. She says in her mind, if I just reach out and touch the hem of his robe, I'll be made well. And so you see this great faith even before Jesus proclaims it to her, your faith has saved you, go in peace, that she has this internal dialogue with herself that the Bible records, and just, if I can just touch him, if I can touch him, everything will be okay. And it is. The amazing thing, it immediately is fixed. Awesome, in the truest sense of that word. Now, compared to the prolonged and agonizing and grueling 12 years, by comparison, how long has Jairus been struggling with his problem? You don't need to give like a specific days, hours, minutes answer here, but by comparison, has he been dealing with this for a long time or a shorter amount of time? Yeah, right. So at least it's shorter in that regard. You get the sense that this has come on a little bit more quickly, or at least it's progressed in such a way that this is a matter that's a little more immediate or pressing. And so is this something that Jairus is concerned for himself, like the woman was concerned for herself? No. Who's he concerned about? His little girl. She is at home dying. And I ran here because, again, the faith says, you're the one who can solve this problem. This great grief, the anxiety of a parent. And then interesting to note here, Jairus comes very publicly seeking Jesus. There's this great crowd to welcome him, and Jairus runs up in front of them all and says, I need you now. And Jesus says, I'll follow you. And then the whole crowd goes with them. So there's a very public acknowledgement. What about the woman? Does she do what she does publicly, at least at first? Very covert. Very much you get the sense that nobody even recognized. The disciples at least didn't see her reach out and touch him. She did this very, very undercover in the sense that she wanted to be discreet. She didn't want anybody noticing. She just needed to be close to Jesus. She just needed to reach out and touch him. But again, you notice, just like with the woman having the immediate solution to her problem, there is an immediate solution once Jesus gets on the scene to Jairus' problem as well. But here's the amazing thing with, well, let's get a few of these visuals up so we can think about this. So, what made the difference between the crowd hemming in and pressing on Jesus and this woman reaching out to touch him? Because Jesus says, power's gone out from me, but the disciples have already said, there are so many people around you, Rabbi. You asked who touched me, like everybody's probably touched you in the last 5 minutes just from the hustling and bustling. We bumped into you so many times. There's a huge crowd. So what makes the difference between the crowd following and this woman reaching out to touch the hem of his garment? A need coupled with faith. Very good. Yeah. It was intentional, right? We can go through life, and a lot of people go through life, having chance encounters or brushing the side of Jesus. Maybe it's somebody who encounters Jesus because of the way you live your life in your neighborhood or your work. And they just have these brushing chance encounters. They're close to Jesus, but they don't recognize their great need, and they're not reaching out intentionally there. John? Yeah. She knew enough to put a great deal of faith in him, to risk all of this, to be in this crowd. As we've said, the situation for her was such that she should not be in a crowd. She said, if I just touch the hem of his robe. And so she does have this great deal of faith and knows who Jesus is, enough to the extent that she puts all of her faith in him, and he delivers. That's awesome. Any other thoughts here with the touching here with Jean? Yeah. Her faith, her understanding of who Jesus was, her understanding of her own problems, that there is no other way. I've tried every other way, and so I'm going to do it. And so faith moves us into doing something. It motivates us to action. We have to act on it. Otherwise, it's just a mental exercise that really doesn't make any difference. Our faith motivates us to act. Matt?
Not only did she know who he was, he knew who she was.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just anyone who come up and touch him. All their problems were gone.
Yeah.
He let the power go,
Mm-hmm.
knowing this woman's situation.
Yeah. Jesus asked the question, who touched me? And certainly he knows, because it's Jesus. But he gives her this opportunity, and you can just imagine this moment. It says that she is trembling with fear, and she comes before him and tells him. And she might be thinking, he is going to be so mad at me. I have bothered my Savior with my petty problem. You ever think about that for you? I don't want to bother Jesus with my problem. Daughter, your faith has saved you, is what he says. Let that give you courage the next time you need to go to God in prayer and seek his solution to the problems that you face in life. No problem is too big. Nothing's going to bother him. Scott? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the great concern that Jairus had for his daughter is the same concern that Jesus had for this daughter of God. Daughter, your faith has made you well. Brian, did I see your hand? Okay, and it's powerful. Now, something very important to note here. I apologize if I cannot get through this. The thing that Jairus is most afraid of happens. And so sometimes in our problems, our difficulties, our hardships, whatever we want to call them, the worst case scenario, the thing that we're dreading the most, that we're just trying to pray doesn't happen, or the thing that we're doing our best to work or to control that doesn't happen, happens. And I cannot imagine Jairus hearing this person come up to him from his household and saying, you don't need to go anymore. She's gone. Just let him go do whatever he was doing before. It's over. And then Jesus says, as we talked about last night with the storm and the walking on water, don't be afraid. Only believe and she will be made well. Now listen, if in that moment you hear the words leave Jesus' lips, what are you, if you're Jairus, thinking? What choice do you have to make at this moment? It's not that my problem went away. My problem was materialized into this great concrete weight that just got slammed on my chest. So what's his choice? Yeah, it's gone past a point where Jesus can help anymore. And so he can either say, never mind, Lord, just go do what you were doing before. Or he can listen to Jesus, again, because Jesus cares about this man and his situation. And he can say, okay, let's go. And you just imagine, again, you're walking into this scenario where there are mourners screaming and crying because a 12-year-old girl has died. And you're the father walking into this situation. You haven't even seen your daughter's body yet. And then Jesus, you can imagine Jairus hears him from the side. Why are you crying? She's just asleep. And the people laugh. Jesus goes in and touches this little girl's hand. And other accounts will be a little more specific of how he says, child, arise. Talitha kumi means, my daughter, my child, I say to you, get up. My child, I say to you, get up. And she does. She gets up. Now, if you're Jairus, what are you thinking? You talk about a roller coaster of emotions, right? What just happened? My greatest fear was realized, and yet somehow I'm here okay. Jesus has made it all better. Now look, we're talking about Jesus in his ministry with miracles. And so sometimes our greatest fears are going to materialize and things will happen. And I'm not here going to teach you tonight that Jesus is just going to make it all go away and rewind the clock and take away all your problems like that. But I tell you what, he has a deep care and concern for your soul and for your life and for all the many various problems that weigh heavy on your heart. And he wants to give you the life and the encouragement and the joy and the peace, not just to get by or to slug on through life or just to survive. He wants you to thrive with life abundantly, like a dead girl getting up off of her deathbed and walking around. Jesus does help. And in our last 10 minutes, I want to turn over to the book of John one more time in John chapter 9. No matter what your problems may be, the Lord Jesus Christ is the solution to them all. There will be other factors. There will be people that he puts in your life. There will be certain opportunities that come about. There are certainly going to be things that you will have a role in doing. But trusting God at the end of the day is what makes our lives fulfilling and what gets us through the hurdles and the hardships. I want you to think about this as we read this story of the blind man who was born blind from birth. Look at John 9 in the first 3 verses here. As he was passing by, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Honest question for that day and time. This is a terrible situation this man finds himself in. Who's to blame? How often do you do that with your problems? Who's to blame? Is it me, God? Is it somebody else? Is it you? Did you do this to me? Verse 3, neither this man nor his parents sinned, Jesus answered. This came about so that God's work might be displayed in him. Spoiler alert, Jesus heals this man and he gets his sight back. A man born blind can now see, and there's a whole slew of things that are going to come about with the leaders of the day and figuring out who Jesus is, accosting this man and his parents. But I just want you to focus on verse 3. What is it going to take for you and me to look at the problems that we face every day and see them in this light? Instead of trying to point the blaming finger at whoever we can, trying to get some reconciliation or recompense, that you say, you know what, I don't know perhaps why this is happening, but I know that God can work in this situation, in this problem that I'm dealing with, to bring about his glory. He's that powerful. He has that authority. He's that amazing, and he cares that much about you and me. Truly, truly amazing. And I'm not saying that's easy. That takes work. To look at the problems that I face, that I have to wake up and look at straight in the eyes, and to say, this is an opportunity for the works of God to be displayed in my life, and put one foot in front of the other. Obviously, when we talk about this question, we've talked about a lot about the physical ailments tonight. Jesus still opens the eyes of the spiritually blind. He opens the ears of the spiritually deaf so that they can hear truth. He lets those who were not able to walk in God's way before now walking with Jesus every single day, and those who were dead in their trespasses and sin alive to God through the great sacrifice that he made for each and every one of us. One final note, and I won't ask this as a question, but just for the sake of time. Jairus and this woman, there's one more connection I see here at least. They teach us something about waiting on God's timing with our problems. For Jairus, things came about very suddenly, and things changed very rapidly, and he put his trust in God. For this woman, she had been waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, and she still had a choice to make every single day. Am I going to put trust in God today? Am I going to approach this one who seems to be the Messiah by all the reports and all the things that he's doing? What other lessons, as we close, can we make application for us as we think about Jesus' power over all these many problems that we've talked about tonight? Scott? Yeah. Yeah. So you talk about patience from 12 years and patience for however long Jesus was there talking to this woman. Minutes, maybe, half an hour? I mean, it's not long. So you talk about patience, we talk about a scale, right? Some of us need to practice patience. I think we all need to practice patience, but when it comes to how we are looking at our problems, we need to keep singing that song, Wait on the Lord. Wait on the Lord. Be strong and take courage. Yes, wait on the Lord. He knows and he cares and he's willing to solve those problems. Brian and then Bob.
I think also about that crowd that the woman is in,
Mm-hmm.
and how many others were there that had those same problems.
Yes.
Bob's point, they didn't have the faith,
Mm-hmm.
right? That the solution was right there before them, and they did not see the solution. They had faith in that.
Yeah. And it's easy to get swept up in a crowd. This is about me and my individual relationship with God. Am I going to do what I need to do to encounter Jesus, to approach him and seek that relationship, to reach out and grab his garment? And the fact is, he wants us to. He wants that. Bob.
We don't have Jesus incarnate now. We're not going to see the kinds of miracles and wonders, the kinds that he did then. But the verse you and I talked about the other night,
Mhm.
John 20:31, says, these things are written so that we might believe.
Yeah.
So that's where our faith comes into play, by knowing what's written about these things.
Yeah. Again, Jesus is still solving our problems, still as present in our problems, walking with us through our problems today, even if it's not in the literal way that he was with Jairus and this woman and the people that he healed. But he's with us if we are with him. Randy.
Tyler, tonight, like the other night, we pray to Jesus for help.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what his training does. He's taught us to help others.
Yeah.
It's not just, we don't just pray for our daily bread, and until you give it to us, we've got to do something. We've got to act. And when our family needs something, we act. Because he gets the glory.
Yeah.
Not us. It's all about him. And that's how we can help each other in these situations.
Yes.
Certainly praying to him because he is what we need to do, but the action sometimes is from us.
Yeah. I'll talk about it like waiting on the Lord doesn't mean sitting there and twiddling our thumbs, right? I got to be looking for those doors that God's opening. I got to be mindful that he wants me to be engaged in this process. And the fact of the matter is, while I'm going through my problems, I can help somebody with theirs. And even in that exchange might inform and address and help me along through the things that I'm going through. And so to the point that was brought up the other night and that Randy's echoing again, part of how God is going to solve our problems is because of the family he's placed us in. So church, be mindful of this. Care about your brothers and sisters' problems. Lean on one another and help each other lean on the God of all comfort and the one, again, who knows all of your problems, cares about all of your problems, and is able to solve every single one of your problems. Thank you all for your thoughts and comments tonight. We're going to let the kids get in here, and we'll have